I'd like to thank Dr. Yong Hun Lee for inviting me to share. There are many things I understand. I understand the book of Revelation. I understand the book of Daniel. But I don't understand why I am last. I just want to start by comparing myself with Reverend Hong this morning. There are a lot of similarities because both of us are preaching just before the holy hour. For him, it's the tea time, but for me, it's before going back time. The only difference is his is a holy hour, but mine is the most holy hour. He commands that there be no question. For me, I'm quite sure there will be no questions. Because everybody wants to go back, take a little bit of rest, and come back tonight. If you have your Bibles, I'd like all of us to turn to the book of Exodus, chapter 32. We are all very familiar with this story. This is the incident of the golden calf and how Moses and Joshua, they were up in the mountains, and Aaron and the people built the golden calf. Let me read just some of the scriptures. Verse 1, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said, "Come, let us make gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man Moses who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron said to them, "Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." And so all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in the ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a golden calf. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." Then reading from verse 17, when Joshua heard the noise as they shouted, he said to Moses, "This is the noise of war in the camp." But he, that is Moses, he said, "This is not the noise of the shout of victory, nor the noise of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear." So it was as soon as he came near the camp that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger became hot, and he cast the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. And then verse 25, now when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them to their shame among the enemies, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Growing in strength and influence. I want to suggest that, of course, we all know there's no one key, but one very important key, I believe, is intercessory leadership. I want to begin by addressing the sub-theme, addressing the challenges. How do we address the challenges if we don't know what the challenges are? So I want to begin by looking at the top 10 challenges facing Asia. Of course, there are many more, and some of you might not agree with what I'm going to share, and that's okay because you are entitled to be wrong. Number one, I think one of the challenges before us is shining in a society where there seems to be so much corruption. I was just reflecting on just the news report in CNN. Corruption in Europe, corruption in the Middle East, corruption in Asia, and I would say many churches are also party to the corruption, because we benefit from it. Therefore, we don't say too much about the ruling party and so on and so forth. And by the way, I am not talking only about Malaysia. I'm talking about everywhere. People are talking about corruption, all right? And the second one is doing church with wicked pharaohs leading the nation. In Libya, you don't seem to be able to get rid of the wicked regime in spite of the civil war. In North Korea, he can execute the deputy premier, and yet the wicked regime is still entrenched. It seems to me like the days when you can topple a regime with mass protests has changed. The spirit of Antichrist today is stronger than you think. And we are sometimes a little bit too simplistic. Not that I don't believe in prayer. Yes, I believe in prayer. But sometimes we think that just because we pray, things will change. I am reminded about Hezekiah, a very godly man of God. But how do you explain the fact that after him, his wicked son Manasseh came and reigned for 55 years, And so that's the challenge for many of us, Number three, the courage to stop preaching the gospel to the rich. We need to change our missions focus. We have our own problems. Nobody seems to want to get out of the city. We tell our Bible college students, go into the East Coast where there was a flood, where there were many opportunities to reach out to people, but nobody wants to go. In Eastern Europe, they don't have that much money down there, and so it's not very enticing, Nobody wants to go. You can't talk to people about Pakistan, you can't talk to people about Afghanistan, but somehow they get dreams and visions and confirmation to go to the US, to go to UK, to go to Australia, and you wonder why, whether really God is speaking, I think we have disengaged from our civic responsibilities to really go to help the poor, the needy, and not too long ago I was reminded that the first group of people to be thrown in the lake of fire, is the cowardly. The cowardly. Those people who are too cowardly to go here, to go there, and so on. And that's the challenge for us, actually. People want to go where the money is, in spite of everything that we say. Number 4 is making a stand in the face of creeping Islamization. I remember I was in the UK about 3-4 years ago. I read in the local newspaper, the local council decided to take down the Christmas lights. And they said that we want to do that because lest we offend the Muslims. And then the next day, the Muslims came up and said, we are not offended. Put back on your lights, And, it's amazing actually what is happening. And people like us who live in Malaysia, and I'm quite sure many other people in other Islamic countries will tell you that it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. I can think of 1 Samuel chapter 11 as the best passage, perhaps one of the better passages that describes what's happening in many Islamic country. In this chapter, we had Nahash, the Ammonite. They went to Jabesh Gilead, and they wanted to conquer that land. And to cut the long story short, the Jabesh Gilead people were willing to make a covenant to serve the Ammonites, but the Ammonites say, we will only allow you to serve us, provided you let us pull out from every person their right eye. And I think that describes basically the spirit, the spirit behind. We're going to have no peace, actually. We're going to have no peace in spite of what everybody says, in spite of, all the negotiations and talks and all that, because the spirit behind Islam is all in the Bible. We can read it for yourself. And this is one of the greatest challenge that's going to face us in Asia. Number 5 is the challenge of disciplization, or the, I call it normalization, all right, of the church. And instead of having a go discipleship, we have a stay discipleship. The church is not strong because many churches are ignoring the basics. If we have an army that is unwilling to die, an army that's unwilling to die is an ineffective army. And I believe there is a special attack on the youth, on our next generation. I think the devil look at some of the older generation, give up on us. We are too stubborn, pig-headed. We won't move. We are strong, and so on. And so the devil reassign his resources and attack the next generation. And actually, we can see that happening in many churches, and it's happening worldwide. I believe so. I remember somebody once said, I remember reading a theologian, he said this, there will come a time when in the church we are not only going to have to share the gospel with people outside, but we have to share with our own church members as well. Because they are so nominal until you wonder whether they are Christians. And I think to a very large extent, it's true. We may have many more people, but I think we should pause and ask ourselves whether they are disciples. Challenge number 6 is the grace to lead a church filled with foolish virgins who have no oil in their lamps. I find this a challenge personally as a pastor. My spirit-filled people in my church are less spirit-filled nowadays, and they speak in tongues, but they seem to be less effective. I think other than Korea, I think if you look at the prayer meeting of many churches in many countries, the attendance is really dismal. More and more people are coming to church late, and I believe this is an indication of the spiritual disease in the heart of the people. Number 7, I think there are too many CEOs who cannot slay Goliaths being appointed as senior pastors. Of course, we all don't agree with the ISIS beheading people. But as I read and as I see the beheading of martyrs, I sometimes think that the devil is trying to send us a prophetic message. And that message is simply this: I can do what David used to do to Goliath. David threw that, used a sling, hit the devil in between, the Goliath in between his eyes, he fell down. But after that, David was able to run to Goliath and then to chop his head off. Today, We can do many things. We can make the Goliath fall and so on. But you know, we don't have that energy to go all the way and chop that head off. Chop that head off. And it seems to me that we have many well-managed churches. We have many things that are happening and so on. But I see in many situations, we just don't have the people who can chop off the head of Goliath. Chop off the head of Goliath. And I think there is a difference. Number 8 is the challenge of unity. As I see people coming together, well, yes, definitely we celebrate the unity. But I ask myself this question: do we have genuine unity, or do we have just togetherness? I see divisions amongst churches in Thailand. I see, and I hear of divisions a little bit about in Korea as well, and in many countries. And I believe it can also happen in Malaysia. And I believe this is going to be a challenge. How do we witness to the world when we are not as united as we should be? Number 9 is missing righteousness. We all know about the new Supreme Court ruling in the U.S. where homosexuality, same-sex marriage is now legal. And I believe this is something that's going to affect all the churches. One of the things we noticed happening was a lot of young people, they didn't understand what was really happening. A lot of them changed their Facebook profile to rainbow color to support. And somebody was just telling me recently in a Christian school, they asked what they thought of this ruling. And 8 out of 10 of them in a Christian environment said, it's okay, it's up to them, you know. And so I asked myself, wow, actually, what did we pass on? You know, what did we pass on? Yeah, we are very, we are very convicted, we are very strong, we got strong views, but the next generation sitting in the pews, they don't mind. They don't mind. And we cannot assume that just because we are passionate, they are, you know. It's good to find out, you know. It's good to go down to the grassroots. And it's also good to remind ourselves, actually, the last day churches in the book of Revelation, out of 7, all 5 of them didn't miss the, all 5 of them missed the mark. And we are told in the book of Revelation, churches taught immorality. They taught immorality.